we're still in the book of Job, and suddenly a new name appears. I mean, we saw before Eliphaz, and we saw Bildad, and we saw Zophar, who came to comfort and to sympathize with Job, who have done not that at all, since they broke their silence after 7 days and 7 nights. And now we have a new name, Elihu. Who is Elihu? Where did he come from? Well, very little is told about him other than who his father was, and that he was younger than the other 3. But he must have come relatively soon after the other 3, because during this particular chapter we see him say that I have considered and listened to what has been said. So he's been there a while. He's been there a while to listen to Job. And we don't know just exactly when he arrived, but he seems to have a lot of information about what has gone on before between Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Job. So let's take a look at chapter 32. He starts out by saying that his anger burned within him, and he could hardly wait to speak. Then he tells us that he kept silent because of the age of the other 3. That's Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. He's out of respect to their being senior to him. You know the old saying, older and wiser. He's kept silent. But obviously the steam's been boiling, and he's become angry. And now he feels a need to go ahead and speak his piece. And that's exactly what he does. Because from chapter 32 through 37, that's 6 chapters, 165 verses, Elihu speaks his piece. And we're looking at chapter 32 today, where his anger is burning within him. He's kept silent because of the respect for the elders. And yet he quickly comments on the fact that age doesn't necessarily equate to wisdom or to knowledge, and that knowledge doesn't necessarily equate to common sense. And he says he's listened carefully, and he's considered, and he's seen no evidence against Job for all of the accusations that the 3 have made against him. And he thinks it's very unfair that they claim to have found wisdom when in fact there's no evidence against Job. And he says, I'll tell you what I think. And I'm going to do it with no partiality and without flattering, because God is my judge. Well, there's some things that we need to apply to our lives from this chapter without a doubt. Verse 3, we need to be sure that we're careful when we speak out of anger. Many times when we speak out of anger, we say things which we wish we had not said. So we need to be careful when we speak out of burning anger. But that's got to be balanced with the fact that if evil is to prevail, all that's necessary is for good men to keep silent. And that's a delicate balance sometimes. That's one of those things that you need to really pray about when you become angry and want to speak, to be sure that your head and your heart and your mind and your lips are all in sync with each other. And that means that God is controlling what you speak with your tongue. Secondly, I think it's important for us to remember that respect for age is a very important thing. The Bible teaches it. The Bible teaches us we should respect our elders. We should show the kind of courtesy that they deserve. And many, many times, they have more wisdom because they have more years of experience than we do. It's good to respect your elders and to recognize that they may have wisdom that's worth listening to. Thirdly, in verse 11, we need to remember that it's good to listen and to consider what's being said, not just to go off on your own thoughts. Just recently, I wrote a letter that's going to go out to 24 pastors. And after writing it in draft form by hand, I entered into my computer thinking about each word in every sentence. Then I printed it out and I read it again and asked myself, if I were a pastor and I received this letter, would I receive the information that's in the letter? Would I read the letter? Would I take offense to anything in the letter? Would I act on anything in the letter? And after I had felt like I had done the very best that I could with the letter, I gave it to my wife. And I said, okay, I want you to read this, and I want you to read it as if you were a pastor receiving it. And I want you to tell me what you think. It was good to review everything that I had to say. And it was good to consider the feelings and the actions that they may or may not take. So it's good to listen. It's good to consider. And we need to be careful when we weigh our words. In verses 10 through 13, we find that statement over and over again. I find no evidence for the charges you've made against Job. I think it's always important for us to remember that when we make accusations against someone, there ought to be evidence. There ought to be witnesses. Innuendos and appearances shouldn't be the only criteria for making accusations. And so then I think that as we look at the fifth reason that we should apply this to our lives, it's good not to show partiality or to try to use flattery in order to win people over or to join in or to go against counsel that they have made. Partiality and flattery has no place in realistically looking at issues. So there's a lot to be learned from chapter 32 as a new voice is heard. We've heard from Eliphaz, we've heard from Bildad, we've heard from Zophar, and we certainly heard from Job. And now we hear from Elihu, and we will be hearing from him for 5 more chapters. It's going to be interesting to see what this young man has to say. Remember, I said we should always evaluate the theology of those that we talk to. What do they believe about God? And is all of their advice and all of their counsel based on who God really is? I think that's important for all of us to consider when we receive advice or when we give advice. Is this God's word? Is this consistent with what he teaches? And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.